Hello and welcome to the latest briefing from Heart Standard. My name is James Cairney, and today I'm joined by Scott McIntosh. And today we're going to be looking back at Wednesday's Edinburgh derby that, of course, finished in a 1-1 draw. We'll be talking a little bit about Frankie Kent's injury. Following news that's come out this morning that the defender will be out for a couple of weeks by the looks of it. And of course, we're looking ahead to Sunday's big game against Celtic at Tynecastle Park. So, I guess, Scott, before we start looking ahead or start wondering about what could be, let's maybe start with what has happened and what has occurred. So, we'll start off with looking back at Wednesday's game. Obviously, you were there. You were in the home end. Obviously, I was in the press box, and I think overall it's fair to say that it's a pretty underwhelming display, and maybe one that I think a lot of fans are quite happy to have just gotten away with a point from. Obviously, Marcondes scored on 28 minutes. Lawrence Shankland, as always, managed to find a leveller via the penalty spot just before half time. And then, I mean, after that, there wasn't really that much to shout about, I didn't think. I don't know, what were your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I think a point is probably the most that we could have sort of asked for off the back of that performance. I think the biggest disappointment was the fact that I think most of us coming to the stadium probably conceded that Hibs were physically better than Hearts on the night. I felt that they pressed the game better. They executed their game plan better than we did as well. And that doesn't happen a lot, specifically at games at Tynecastle. So wouldn't fault anyone's effort. I think the effort was there, and I think we defended pretty resolutely for the most part. But yeah, there was definitely aspects of the performance that could have been better in terms of sort of matching up against Hibs. But thankfully, we didn't put ourselves in a position where we started to lose a couple of games in a row and sort of get into a run that we potentially, could have mirrored last season. So I think it was good to sort of stop the rot pretty early on there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's the way. Like, it was like, okay, I think it's fair to say. I don't think many people would disagree that Hearts didn't really get going on Wednesday night. But in games like that, where the team haven't really turned up and not performed to their best, in a game where, let's be honest, Hibs were probably the better side, to get a point from that, like you say, it does help just kind of lift that morale, and that you say stops that rut before it even starts, I suppose. So I guess what were your thoughts on the team selection then? Because obviously Naismith went with a back four for this one. It was kind of like a 4-4-2 almost, wasn't it? Really, with Scott Fraser out on the right hand side. I kind of felt that it really hampered Hearts' the build up play coming from the back. I mean, I think you saw that with there quite a few times in the first half where Xander Clark was played short from a goal kick. They kind of passed it around the back forward, and the way the Hibs were attackers were pressing right up, and obviously they've got that pace up that end of the park as well. It just meant that Hearts were just kind of shelling long balls, I felt, and it all felt a bit hopeful rather than careful or thoughtful. And I think that was a big problem for me. And I think that because Hibs kind of pressed high at the park and stopped Hearts from building out, it meant that Hearts didn't really have much of a response to that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not adverse to going back to front, and I think given that the weakest area, the Hibs team, generally speaking, would be their back five. I don't think shelling balls up to Shankland, getting them sort of going up 1-on-1 with Bashiri is a bad tactic. I think the problem stems from the second balls off the direct ball. I think the problem is the fact that we had no sort of cohesive press. I think if you're going to press, you need to press as a team. And the problem was there was times where maybe 3 or 4 Hearts players were maybe leading the press at the front, but then nobody else in the team was following on from that. So there was a huge gap in the middle of the park, which meant that any sort of second balls being contested, generally speaking, the Hearts players weren't really getting on top of it. That changed slightly in the second half. We sort of pushed Cammy Devlin a bit further forward for around 15 minutes prior to him being substituted. And I thought that we were doing a little bit better then in terms of winning a few second balls. Neuenhoff grew into the game as it went on as well. But yeah, that was probably one of the more disappointing aspects. I would say over the piece of the season, we've not been great at that. Our strongest point has been defensively, we've been pretty good. Defending set plays, we've been pretty good. And then we've had Shankland to sort of rely upon from an offensive sort of standpoint. So there are a few things that Stephen Naismith and his team that he sort of possibly look at going forward. But I think having Devlin coming back may help with that. Over the next few weeks, that's an option they've got to maybe play Devlin a little bit further forward. I think Sunday's probably a good example of that. If you think about, McGregor's role within that Celtic team playing that sort of quarterback, I think playing Devlin in a 10 position would be pretty astute, in a fixture like that. So that's hopefully something we're going to see. I mean, in terms of the overall team selection, I was worried about Scott Fraser starting. I think we know what Scott Fraser can bring to a football team, but he's not someone who's overly proactive off the ball. And I think putting him in front of Natty Atkinson when Hibs had Melida and Jordan Abita running down the left flank. Don't get me wrong, Natty Atkinson was way off it on Wednesday, but he wasn't helped by the fact that both Scott Fraser and Kenneth Fargas offered little to no protection throughout the 90 minutes. So, yeah, I think the inclusion of Fraser was a bit strange. In hindsight, would it have been better to have maybe kept somebody like Vargas on the bench to give us an option in the second half, because we really didn't have anything, particularly being Oda, with Oda being injured. So that's something as well, but that's more of a hindsight thing, more than anything else. I think it's more about application and having no cohesive press rather than the formation. The formation's not too big an issue for me, but yeah, Hibs got their team selection right, and above all else, the majority of their players won their individual battles. The only sort of individual battle that I felt we really won over the piece was probably Alan Forrest against Liam Miller. That's the only one where I felt like the Hearts player was getting the best out of his opponent over the piece in the 90 minutes.
Aye, definitely. You could see that where Miller just didn't look comfortable at all with Forrest. And to be fair, a lot of players have found that this season that actually it's really difficult when going up against Alan Forrest, particularly when he's out on that left-hand side, when he gets the ball and he's got the time to drive at you and try and make life difficult and make you uncomfortable. He's absolutely fantastic at that. And obviously he's having a great season. I'm glad you picked up on Devlin and Fraser though, because I thought that, that was Devlin's first start since October, I think it was, November perhaps. It's been a good long while, and obviously part of that was down to they had that injury that obviously ruled them out of December and the start of January. But part of it as well is the fact that he seemed to have kind of slipped down the pecking order, I suppose, at Tynecastle. But I thought he had a pretty solid game. I thought, particularly when you put it in the context of how everyone else got on, I thought he was one of the better performers on the night for Hearts. And like you say, when he was getting a bit more advanced, I think he was quite an effective presence there. And again, that's something that when we look ahead to Sunday, that's certainly something that could be really useful. Fraser's again, it's a frustrating one because I agree. Like you, I think there's definitely a player in there. I just think that I'm not convinced by him playing out there on the right hand side though. I think that his best work seems to come when he's either, I think when he's kind of playing in a central area and he kind of drifts to the left. I watched a fair bit of him at Charlton. Just when it was announced that he was signed, so I could do a kind of scouting report on him, see what he's all about. And that seems to be the areas where he's really great, when he's kind of drifting outfield onto his favoured left foot, rather than I thought it was just a bit one dimensional on Wednesday night because you know that he's playing out right. He's got an absolutely brilliant left foot, so that's just what he's constantly looking to do. And because of that, I think you lose a bit going forward. And like you say, off the ball, he probably doesn't offer all that much, which then gives Atkinson a hell of a lot of work to get through. I will say a quick word of defence for Atkinson as well is that because again I agree, I don't think he had a good game on Wednesday. I thought he had a very poor game at Ibrox before that, but he did say that he'd been I think his exact words were he's been struggling with a little bit of flu, that he was kind of combating, and so he was just trying to get through the game and all that. So I think there's degrees of mitigation there, I think, for sure. But like you say, it's probably an off night. Not Hearts' best performance of the season by any stretch, but at the end of the day, a point's a point. It means that they go into the game this weekend, not coming off the back of 2 defeats. So that's something, they managed to pick up a little bit of momentum, I suppose. But I guess one of the other big points from Wednesday night that it's not really came out until today, but is going to be Frankie Kent, who's now going to be out for, it's the way Naismith was talking, it sounds like it's going to be a week or two. It was spotted at Oriam today, Frankie Kent that is, with like protective leg brace on and with crutches on. Obviously that's never a great sign. People get a bit worried when they see that. From what we understand though, that's more of a kind of protective or preventative measure. We don't think it's quite as serious as you'd maybe at first expect, but it does still mean that, you know, he will miss, for instance, the Celtic game this weekend. He will miss the Morton game, you'd imagine, the Scottish Cup quarter-final through there at Capello a week on the Monday. And then he might even miss the Ross County game right before the international break as well. So those are going to be 3 big games that obviously it'd be great to have him around for. How do you see that his absence impacting the team? Because obviously since he's come in the summer, I think Airdrie is the only game he's not started. And I think in the League Cup as well, in the Partick Thistle game, he came off with 20 minutes to go. But apart from that, he's played basically every minute of basically every game.
Yeah, I mean, when he was hobbling about on Wednesday, I sort of said to my friend that was at the game with that if he was a sort of 50-50 for Sunday, I'd rather the rest him. I think it's a weird one. People would normally say, do you not need your best defenders against one of the best teams? But I do think that Celtic play a lot of the game in front of you, and it's not so much about having players that are physically strong. And I do think that someone like a Toby Sibbick can come in on Sunday and sort of acquit themselves pretty well in that sort of environment. I think the bigger miss out the 2 fixtures will be the Morton game. Morton will be very direct, going off of what I saw against them on Motherwell a few weeks ago. You know, it will be a bit of an aerial bombardment, particularly for set plays, long throws, corner kicks. And I think it would have been handy to have had Frankie Kent for that fixture above all else. So yeah, that is going to be a bit of a miss. It's a good opportunity for maybe somebody like Sibbick coming in. It might mean that Hearts might change to a 3. I'm not sure they would go with a 4 with, say, Kingsley and Rolls. So there is a reasonable chance now that you might see them revert to a 3. That allows them to maybe bring Lembikisa back in the team if Atkinson's been struggling as well. So it does give them a few other options. I'd be very surprised if they didn't play with a 3 against Celtic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just in the process just now of writing up my predicted lineup for Sunday, and I've went for the back 3. Partly because, like you say, I think that Kingsley and Rolls as a centre half pairing, it makes me a bit nervous. Like, you know, I think it's particularly going up against players of Celtic's quality. I mean, we saw them midweek. Was it 7-1 they won in the end? 8-1 something? You know, sort of ludicrous. So, you know, obviously, you know, their attacking players are, you know, in form and up for it. So that, you know, you do need to have that proper defensive resilience there. So I think you're right. I think we'll see the back 3. Obviously, that does mean it's going to be a big game for, I think, Toby Sibbick in particular. If he's playing, we know that there's been a couple of games this season where he's looked a bit hairy. And chances are, I mean, I might be wrong here, but I would imagine that if your back 3 is Rolls, Sibbick, and Kingsley, Sibbick's probably going to play in the middle, right?
I mean, there's a chance they may go with Kingsley playing centrally. But I mean, Kingsley has played right of the 3 a few times this season, so it wouldn't be a huge shock to see them go with that. I think Sibbick would be generally quite comfortable coming out from the back with the ball. I think my only issue with Sibbick playing centrally is I think his biggest deficiency is positioning within the box and sort of anticipation. I think he struggles with that a little bit, and I think considering the movement of Kyogo, I wouldn't be keen on him playing that central role, but it might happen. It depends, you know, what they think with regards to Kingsley playing there, but I think I'd rather see Kingsley play centrally over Sibbick.
Yeah, I get what you mean, because he does have, like, Kingsley, we know he's not the biggest centre half. He's not the most physically imposing guy, but he does still do really well in the air, and obviously with like you say, obviously Kyogo is going to be a problem in terms of his movement, but also the guy they've got on loan from Norwich, Ida, he's scored a few cracking headers since he's come in. In fact, I can just see there Graham in the comments just making a similar point, saying he does a big threat, so we need to be wary of him as he's far more physical than Kyogo. And you're right, I think that if there was that kind of physical battle in the middle between that, between Hearts defender and someone like Ida, I'd probably back Kingsley. I think he just seems a bit more solid and a bit more of a kind of safe pair of hands in that area of the park. We've also got another comment here from Graham as well saying, honestly, I am fearing Sunday. That's not very good. Kent being out is a huge blow. Can see it being Rose, Civic, and Kingsley in a back three. So, as I said, yeah, I think that's probably what we're likely to see. And then, like you said as well, I think we probably will end up seeing Lembikisa coming in at right wing back. I think that I know certainly Joel doesn't think that Naismith seems to trust him in Lembikisa in a back four. I still think we might see that at some point again this season, but like you say, I think he is more suited to the back three where he's got that extra protection in behind him, and it does give him a chance to kind of get forward and take risks on the ball, which is one of the things he's actually really good at. Okay, it doesn't always pay off. There's been certain times where you kind of throw your hands up in the air and go, "Oh no, what's he done?" But I think particularly in a game against someone like an opponent like Celtic, having that kind of player who will try and conjure up something is really important. I think we probably will end up seeing him. In terms of the midfield, then, how do you see that going? I'm assuming we're both going for the 3-5-2.
I think you'd go with a 3-5-2. I mean, there's what I'd want to see, and then there's what I think we probably will see. I'd love to see Devlin play in that advanced role, and I would really like to see Tate and Neuenhoff playing behind him. I think I'm at a stage just now with certain players like Grant and Benny and that where I think I've seen just about enough for the time being, and I do think that some of them need to have a bit of a time out of the team. And one of the things that really impresses me about Tate is just the simple things, just the way that he receives the ball. He opens his body up, which is something that really frustrated me on Wednesday. I think Atkinson was probably the worst one for it, where the way that he receives the ball means that 99 times out of 100 he's having to play the ball back because he doesn't open his body up to allow him to play a forward pass. But he's not alone. There's a few players in the squad that are like that. I think normally I would be adverse to playing somebody like Tate for the start in a game against Celtic because he's going to have to do a lot more off the ball than what he has had to do so far in a first team match. But there is a little bit of me that would just like to see how he would match up against them, because I do think he's somebody that potentially could be a starter for us in future seasons. So I'd like to see Tate and Neuenhoff play with Devlin maybe just in front of them in that sort of midfield three.
Oh, that's quite a bold selection. I like it. Because I was looking at mine, I thought I'd gone for. I expect Neuenhoff will play just because, as we know, he's really came onto a game over the last few months. We know that Naismith's clearly a massive fan as well, and it's hard to really see him getting overlooked. He's one of the first names in the team sheet at the moment. I would also take Benny Van Ingham in. I know you said you've had enough of him, but I would definitely like to see him in that number 6 role. But crucially not just sitting back. Like I think against Rangers, for instance, he was quite guilty of just sitting back and not really contributing much on the ball when Hearts were getting forward. Whereas if you think back to the 2-0 win at Parkhead back in December, he was absolutely brilliant at that, when there's those moments where he can often frustrate the fans when he gets the ball maybe about the halfway line and he maybe takes a touch, has a look around, takes another touch, then makes his pass rather than just making the early pass. But I think that certainly in the game at Parkhead, he was really good at not doing that and actually just being a bit braver on the ball and being a bit more forward thinking. And I think Hearts, reap the rewards of that. The other one as well I was thinking of is we might well see Aidan Denham come back into the team. I know he's not been in the squad for a while, but I thought again he was really, really, really important in the win at Parkhead a couple of months ago. I thought that particularly the way that kind of like the wide centre mids, so himself and Neuenhoff, and then the two wing backs, Cochrane and would have been Atkinson, I think it was at that time. The way they all linked up was just brilliant. The way that the wing backs would push up, the centre mids would come back and cover, and it just left Celtic with nowhere to go. And again, just we know exactly how Celtic are going to play. We know exactly how Brendan Rodgers' team plays, and particularly as if you can make sure that you slow them down and make life, and kind of cut off those passing lanes out wide, it can leave them with big problems. And then as we saw back in December, that's when Hearts can really hurt them. So I did wonder if we might end up seeing Denham come back into the team for this one, just because I think that off the ball he does have that kind of energy and that industry, and that is also just that positional awareness that makes life really difficult for a team like Celtic. So that'd be the three that I'd go for. But it's interesting that we've went so out of the 3 midfield spots we've got. The only one we're agreed on is Callum Neuenhoff. So that's quite an interesting one. But yeah, the Hull's been pretty good recently, so I think we can expect to see that. And then I guess just the last question as well, of course, would be up front. We can assume a certain Mr. Shankland will be there. Who do you think is going to be with them, though?
So I think it'll be Shankland and Forrest, but I think this is a game where they should give Tagawa a run. No reason I'm saying
Really?
that.
All right, that's
Celtic
interesting. Okay.
Celtic do play with a very high line, and this is possibly the only fixture where his skill set would actually bring a positive to the team. I've always been on record as saying my issue with Tagawa is not with the individual himself, anything to do with his ability. I just felt it was poor recruitment because I just think you play that many teams with a low block in Scotland that the one thing that he's good at doing, which is getting space in behind the back line, he's not going to get much of a chance of that. Whereas I watched Celtic against Motherwell at the weekend, and I appreciate they'll have Carter Vickers back in the back line, so that does change things a little bit, but they were pressing very high, and Motherwell, particularly in the first half, were getting a lot of joy and just knocking balls into the channels for sort of Baron Vale to sort of run onto. So I do think this would be a good fixture to give Tagawa a chance and just see if, you can get something out of him. But I do think it's more than likely going to be Forrest maybe playing up front with Shankland.
Aye. No, Joe, you make a really good point because you're right. I mean, in terms of the games that Tagawa was actually suited to, there's not that many, and this is probably one of them. I mean, you look at the game at Rangers last weekend when he came on, and okay, it was 5-0 down, the game's done, all the rest of it, fine. But I thought he looked pretty good actually when he came on, like in terms of what he had to work with, in terms of but because again, like you say, Rangers had that high line, there was space to move into, he did have chances to get, he had a decent shot and goal as well that Butland had to make a good save to deny him. So I take the point, but again, like you, it's like I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see him come off the bench at some point if Hearts are needing a goal. Would he start? I'm just picturing the fan reaction if the team sheet comes out on Sunday afternoon, and Alan Forrest is on the bench, Kenneth Vargas is on the bench, and Tagawa's leading the line. I could already see just the meltdowns on Twitter and people going, "No, what's going on?" So yeah, I think you're right. I think I'd be more inclined to go for Forrest as well. I think that he probably doesn't offer you as much like final product when you do get into the final third, and you try and get shots away, try and get crosses in the box. But what he does do is that everything up to that point, he's absolutely brilliant at keeping the hold of the ball. He's great with the ball under pressure, and he can really help you build out if Shankland's kind of that focal point in attack when you can hit him going long. You've got Forrest playing off him, and he's great at just getting the ball, drifting wide, holding it, waiting for the support to come. And I think for that reason, that's probably why we'll see him. But again, the other thing as well would be that having someone like Vargas on the bench, not exactly a bad option to have in the second half if you do need to change things up. I do think that Vargas's best performances have come in that central area, and I think that's where he's looked at his best. But having said that, I just think that in a game like this, I think Forrest does need. I think because he's just a bit more careful with the ball. I think that matters a lot against teams like Celtic. Because there were a couple of times as well on Wednesday night when Vargas was through. I think it was 3 in total. Now, one of them was flagged for offside, so it didn't come to anything. But I remember all 3 of them, like he kind of went through and had to go himself, and I was like, "Oh, you've got to cut that back to Shankland or whoever else it was." I
think it was the one with Grant and Forrest. That was probably the worst one because he didn't even get a shot and goal with that one. I think it got blocked. That was probably the one where you're like, it was literally 3-on-1, 3-on-2. I get it, I think players at his age, they will sort of tend to play the game with their head down quite a bit, especially when they get a bit overexcited. But yeah, I think you need somebody with a bit of discipline in it. In Naismith's mind, I can imagine him looking at Forrest and going, I can trust him, and I can trust him to not only do the right thing when we're in possession, but also when we're out of possession, which is why I think he'll probably start. But yeah, I do think Tagawa would have been an interesting one, just purely down to how Celtic play. But yeah, I definitely think Forrest will probably play there.
Aye, no, I think you're right. I think you're probably right. Okay, right. I'm going to put you on the spot now, Scott. I'm going to ask for a score prediction. Is it going to be 2 wins in a row for the Jam Tarts against Celtic, or is it going to be brought crashing back down to earth once again?
Well, I think it'll be a tight game because I do think we've got the players who are capable of making it frustrating for Celtic in the same way that we did at Parkhead. The issue is going to be what we're going to do when we've got the ball. and we are struggling in that respect. I think it'll probably be 2-1 Celtic. I do think it'll be a very tight game, and I think we will get some chances, but I can see Celtic just edging it and having that little bit of quality.
Well, let's hope. Well, I hope for everyone's sake that you're wrong. I hope so.
I know.
But
Same with
I'm
me.
inclined to agree. I can see it being quite a tight game, but I could see Celtic just edging it. Like overall, just I think part of it as well is that as much as this game is important for Hearts, obviously it's a chance to strengthen their grip on third. For Celtic, it's basically must win, isn't it? Just now the way the title
Same
race
as
is
the
going.
Rangers game, it's
Yeah.
that. And I felt we were possibly hampered by that on Wednesday. I don't know if there's just a little bit of lack of decisiveness with the players, even subconsciously, because we're that far in front. The need of the opponents is maybe surpassing our own need just now. And that can add to a lot, especially when you're playing against teams who already have a significant quality advantage over you. So, yeah, I think in the same way as Rangers last week, that need to win, I think, might just be enough to get them over the line, even although I think we'll make it tough for them.
But again, the flip side of that is that, the longer it stays at 0-0 or, even 1-0 Hearts or 2-0, the longer Celtic aren't ahead, the more angsty and agitated that away crowd's going to get. They're going to be nervous because there's very little room for error at the top just now in the title race, and it's just this is where you need to have basically.
And they'll know what Rangers will have done as well.
Exactly.
There's a decent
Yeah.
chance Rangers will be the 5 points ahead by the time that we play them, so there will be that pressure there.
Exactly, it's a great chance to really make the most of that, I think, and that's. I mean, me and Joe were talking about this before the Rangers game, saying it's a great opportunity because again, it's that way of like, if things aren't going well, people might start getting a bit frustrated. Obviously, was 80 seconds in, that goes up in smoke. So hopefully that doesn't happen this time around. Hopefully, because again, I think that the longer it goes on, that kind of nervousness from the stands does flow down onto the pitch, I think, and you can see that in the players, and they can start making the wrong decisions and things like that. So hopefully that happens. But we shall see. Anyway, we'll leave it there because that's us just kind of for half an hour now. And we need to let people get on with their day. But I'll just quickly say that we've got a few things going up on the site over the next few days, just looking ahead to the Celtic game. So me and Joe will have our predicted lineups going out tomorrow. We'll have a Stephen Naismith Q&A going up on the site at 10:30 tonight. There will be Callum Neuenhoff Q&A going out first thing tomorrow morning. Joe's looking into how Frankie Kent's absence could affect the first team. And there's also a data report, and there's going to be a tactical analysis as well coming from the Hibs game on Wednesday night. So there's plenty of content to get your teeth stuck into, both on our website and in the app, which I'd highly recommend if you've not got already. And then, of course, we'll be back on Sunday with our usual stuff, instant analysis. We'll get the reaction from Naismith, and then on Monday we will be back on here to dissect what's hopefully another Hearts win. So on that note, we'll leave it there, and I'll just say thanks again to Scott for joining me.
No problem.
And thanks as well to everyone who watches and subscribes. And we'll see you on Monday. Cheers.